You've been lied to. You think the reason you aren't wealthy yet is a lack of effort, but the truth is much more uncomfortable. Your hard work is actually the very thing keeping you broke. We've been conditioned to trade our most vivid years for a someday that rarely arrives, effectively selling our souls for a cubicle and a 401k. It's a quiet tragedy to realize you're winning a game that isn't worth playing. In The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, he exposes the deferred life plan for exactly what it is, a trap. Most people skip this wisdom and fail, but listen, half knowledge is more dangerous than ignorance. You need to hear this entire reflection to the very end, or you'll just keep running on that same wheel. By the end of this, the cage door will be wide open. So, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Invisible Cage. You call normal. Everyone says they want to be a millionaire, but they're lying. What they actually want is the lifestyle they think only a millionaire can afford. It's a funny thing to realize, that we spend 40 years of our best energy chasing a number, hoping that at the end of it, we'll finally have permission to do the things we could probably do next Tuesday. We've been sold this idea that life is a linear climb, a long, exhausting haul toward a golden sunset called retirement. But if you look closely at the people who have already arrived there, they don't always look like they've won. They look tired. They look like they've forgotten why they started running in the first place. What if this isn't the life you meant? Think about the last time you felt truly, deeply alive. It probably wasn't while you were clearing your inbox or sitting in a meeting that could have been a 3-sentence email. It was likely a moment where time didn't matter. A quiet morning in a foreign city. A long conversation with someone who actually sees you. Or that specific silence you only find at the top of a mountain. Now, compare that to the default setting of your Tuesday morning. We've accepted a strange deal. We trade our youth, our health, and our most vivid years for the promise of relaxation when we're too old to fully enjoy it. We call it career progression, but sometimes it feels more like a well-decorated cage. We stay because the walls are familiar. We stay because everyone else is in a cage too, and we've convinced each other that this is just what being an adult feels like. It's uncomfortable to admit, but most of us aren't afraid of failing. We're afraid of the uncertainty that comes with actually succeeding on our own terms. It's much safer to follow the rules, even if the rules are broken. We wait for a sign, a promotion, or a specific bank balance to tell us it's okay to start living. We tell ourselves, someday is a day of the week. But if you look at a calendar, it's nowhere to be found. Someday is just a soft way of saying never. I remember sitting in a cubicle once, looking at the fluorescent lights and realizing that if I stayed, I knew exactly what my life would look like in 20 years. That was the most terrifying thought I'd ever had. The safe path was actually the riskiest thing I could do, because it guaranteed I would waste the only currency that actually matters: time. We've been conditioned to worship the grind, to wear our stress like a badge of honor. If you aren't busy, you must be lazy. If you aren't tired, you aren't working hard enough. But there's a massive difference between being productive and just being active. You can spend 10 hours a day moving pebbles from one pile to another, and you'll be exhausted, but you won't be any closer to freedom. This invisible cage isn't built of iron bars, it's built of shoulds. I should buy this house. I should take this promotion. I should wait until the kids are grown. We postpone the things that make us feel human in exchange for the things that make us feel secure. Funny how peace feels boring until chaos returns. We claim we want freedom, but when we get a Saturday with nothing to do, we panic and reach for our phones. We've forgotten how to just exist without an agenda. To break out, you have to stop asking for permission from a system that benefits from you staying exactly where you are. You have to realize that the experts, the bosses, and the people who wrote the rules of work are mostly just making it up as they go, just as scared as you are. Once you see that the cage is unlocked, the only thing left to deal with is the open door. And that's where the real work begins. Chapter 2. Redefining rich before you chase it. Wealth is a slippery thing. We've been trained to measure it by the weight of a bank account, but money is a hollow metric if you don't have the time or the mobility to actually use it. Think about the guy who makes $500,000 a year but works 80 hours a week and hates his commute. Now look at the woman who makes $60,000 but has a system that lets her live in a beach town in Mexico, working 4 hours a week from her porch. Who is actually richer? The world will tell you it's the guy with the big salary, but your gut knows better. Real wealth isn't about accumulation, it's about the power to choose. It's the ability to design your days without needing to check with a gatekeeper first. Fear shrinks when you finally look at it. Most of us are running a race we didn't sign up for, chasing goals we borrowed from a television commercial or a neighbor we don't even like. We want more because we haven't defined what enough looks like. If I asked you right now what you would do if you had $10 million, you'd probably give me a vague answer about traveling or quitting your job. But vagueness is the enemy of freedom. You don't need $1 million to go to Thailand for 6 months. You just need a plan and a few thousand. By defining exactly what your dream costs, the actual math of it, you realize that the life you've been putting off is often much cheaper and closer than the one you're currently living. We stay paralyzed because we imagine that stepping off the traditional path will lead to total ruin. We play this internal movie where we quit our jobs and end up living under a bridge, starving and forgotten. But let's be honest, how likely is that? If you tried something new and it failed, could you get another job? Probably. Could you move back in with family for a month? Likely. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. When you sit down and actually name your fears, write them out, look them in the eye, they lose their teeth. You realize that the safety of your current job is actually a slow-motion risk, a guaranteed way to reach 70 with a heart full of what-ifs. It's a strange irony, but the things we fear most are usually the things we most need to do. That phone call you're avoiding, that project you're putting off, that conversation you're dodging, that's exactly where the growth is hiding. We use being busy as a shield to protect us from the discomfort of doing something that actually matters. It's easier to answer 100 emails than it is to sit down and figure out how to automate your income. One feels like work, the other feels like a threat to our identity. Sometimes I think we're addicted to the struggle. We feel guilty if things come too easily, so we complicate them just to feel like we've earned our keep. But the universe doesn't give extra points for difficulty. If you can find a shortcut to joy, why wouldn't you take it? There is no prize for being the most exhausted person in the room. Being rich is simply the freedom to spend your time however you want, with whomever you want. Everything else is just expensive noise. Chapter 3. Doing less and getting more of yourself back. I have a confession to make. For years I wore my exhaustion like a medal. I thought that if I wasn't constantly on the verge of a breakdown, I wasn't actually doing the work. We live in a culture that treats busyness as a proxy for importance. If your calendar is a solid block of color and your phone is vibrating off the nightstand, you must be winning, right? But one afternoon, I caught my reflection in a dark laptop screen and realized I was just a highly efficient hamster on a wheel. I was getting a lot done, but none of it mattered. Most of what we do is just a way to avoid the terrifying realization that we are wasting our lives on the trivial. Most effort is noise, not progress. We've been taught that the harder you work, the more you get. It's a nice sentiment, but it's a lie. In reality, about 80% of your results come from 20% of your actions. That means most of us spend the vast majority of our day drowning in the thick of thin things. We answer low-priority emails to feel a sense of completion. We attend meetings to feel included. We consume endless streams of information, news, social feeds, podcasts, under the guise of staying informed. But information is only useful if it leads to action. Otherwise, it's just a digital weight we carry around, making us feel heavy and anxious without ever moving us forward. There's a certain quiet violence in a to-do list that never ends. It tells you that you aren't enough yet. It keeps you in a state of perpetual not yet-ness. The secret to reclaiming your life isn't about time management. It's about time elimination. It's about having the courage to be unproductive in the eyes of the world so you can be effective in the things that truly move the needle. This means saying no. A lot. It means letting small fires burn so you can focus on the big things. It's a hard pill to swallow because we want to be liked, and saying no feels like a rejection. But every time you say yes to a pointless request, you are saying no to your own freedom. Funny how we crave more time, but we kill the time we already have. We've become terrified of silence. We fill every gap in the day with a screen, terrified of what we might hear if we just sat with our own thoughts for 10 minutes. We've outsourced our attention to the highest bidder, and then we wonder why we feel so drained. Creating space isn't a luxury. It's a survival tactic. When you stop worshipping the clock and start respecting your energy, the world doesn't fall apart. In fact, it starts to get much clearer. You don't need more hours in the day. You need more life in your hours. That requires a brutal pruning of everything that doesn't serve the vision you defined for yourself. It's okay to be unavailable. It's okay to not know what's happening in the news this morning. It's okay to leave an email unanswered if it doesn't move your life forward. When you stop trying to do everything, you finally have the room to do the one or two things that actually change everything. The goal isn't to be busy, it's to be free. Chapter 4. Designing income that doesn't own you. There was a guy I knew who ran a small boutique firm. He was making more money than anyone in our circle, but he was also the only person I knew who looked like he was aging in dog years. He couldn't go to dinner without 3 phones on the table. He couldn't take a vacation without his laptop open by the pool. He had all the money, but he was a slave to the mechanism that created it. One night, he told me he felt like he was keeping a plane in the air by flapping his own wings. If he stopped for even a second, the whole thing would plummet. That's not a business. That's a high-paying prison sentence. Income should serve life, not replace it. We have this deeply ingrained belief that there is a direct, moral link between how many hours we suffer and how much money we deserve. If the money comes too easily or while we're sleeping, we feel like we're cheating. But the new rich understand a different truth. The goal is to decouple your time from your earnings. You want to build a muse, a small automated engine that generates cash flow without requiring your physical presence. This isn't about getting rich quick. It's about getting rich slow while you're doing something else. It's the difference between being the engine and being the architect who designed it. The hardest part isn't the technical setup. It's the emotional shift of letting go of perfection. Most people never launch their idea because they're waiting for it to be flawless. They spend months tweaking a logo or a website, terrified that if it's not perfect, the world will laugh at them. But perfection is just a fancy word for procrastination. The real world rewards experiments, not theories. You have to be willing to put something good enough out there and let the market tell you if it's worth your time. If it fails, you've lost a few $100s and a week of work. If it succeeds, you've just bought back your future. It's a strange feeling when the first few dollars hit your account while you're out for a walk or playing with your kids. It's small at first, maybe just enough to pay for a coffee or a tank of gas. But that moment changes everything. It proves that the 9-to-5 isn't the only way to survive. You start to see money as a tool for leverage rather than a reward for endurance. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be the one who builds the smartest system. Funny how we're taught to be employees before we're taught to be humans. We spend our lives building someone else's dream because we're too afraid to bet on our own. But the real risk isn't starting a small side hustle that might fail. The real risk is spending 40 years building something you don't own and can't take with you. When you design an income that doesn't own you, you stop being a cog in the machine and start becoming the operator. You realize that you don't need a boss to give you permission to be wealthy. You just need a system that works while you're busy living. Chapter 5. Reclaiming time. Through leverage and letting go. What if it works without you? It's a terrifying question, isn't it? Most of us have spent our lives building an identity around being the fixer, the person who has all the answers, the one who stays late because nobody else can do it quite right. We tell ourselves we're being responsible, but usually we're just being egomaniacs. We're addicted to the feeling of being needed. We hoard tasks like precious stones, convinced that if we let go, the whole sky will fall. But the truth is, your business or your job should be a machine you operate, not a hole you crawl into every morning. What if it works without you? The real shift happens when you stop asking, "How do I do this?" and start asking, "How can this be done?" There is a massive emotional hurdle in realizing that someone else, perhaps someone halfway across the world, can do a task 80% as well as you can for a fraction of the cost. We resist delegation because we're afraid of losing control, but control is often just an illusion that keeps us small. Freedom isn't the ability to do everything. It's the ability to ensure everything gets done while you are somewhere else entirely. This is the magic of geo-arbitrage and outsourcing. It's realizing that your time is worth $50 an hour, but you're spending it on $5 tasks. You're literally paying to stay busy. I remember the first time I hired someone to handle my inbox. I felt like a fraud. I felt lazy. I spent the first 3 days checking to see if they were doing it right, which of course took more time than just doing it myself. But then, on the 4th day, I went for a hike. I didn't check my phone once. When I got back, the problems had been solved, the fires had been put out, and the world was still spinning. That was the moment I realized that my presence wasn't a requirement. It was a bottleneck. By insisting on being involved in every detail, I wasn't helping. I was the one standing in the way of progress. Funny how we call it responsibility when it's actually just a lack of trust. We don't trust our systems, we don't trust our people, and ultimately, we don't trust ourselves to be okay if we aren't working. We've become so used to the noise that the silence of a well-run system feels deafening. But that silence is where your life actually lives. It's where you find the space to think, to create, and to breathe. Learning to disappear is a skill. It requires you to build processes that are so clear and so robust that you become the least important part of the equation. The goal is to become replaceable. In the traditional world, being replaceable is a nightmare. It means you're fired. In the world of the new rich, being replaceable is the ultimate victory. It means you've successfully built a bridge between your income and your time. You can walk across that bridge and leave the work behind, knowing that the structure will hold. When you finally let go of the reins, you don't fall off the horse. You realize the horse knew the way all along, and for the first time in years, you can actually look at the scenery. Chapter 6. Leaving the office. Without burning your identity. We have this strange, almost religious attachment to the physical act of being at work. Even if the work is done, even if we're just staring at a screen waiting for the clock to hit 5, we stay. We stay because we're afraid of what it looks like if we leave. We're afraid that if we aren't visible, we aren't valuable. It's a collective hallucination we've all agreed to participate in. The idea that productivity is measured in hours sat in a specific chair under specific lights. But security is a ghost. The more you try to grab it, the faster it thins out between your fingers. Security fades when you cling to it. I knew a woman who was the backbone of her department. She worked 60 hours a week, knew every client's name, and handled every crisis. She was terrified of asking for remote work because she thought they'd realize they could survive without her. But that's the paradox. She was so valuable that she had all the leverage, yet she was the only one who didn't know it. We wait for someone in a suit to hand us a golden ticket and say, "You've done enough. Go be free." But permission is a currency that is rarely given. It has to be taken. You don't ask for a new life. You negotiate for it, one boundary at a time. Leaving the office, whether it's going remote or quitting to build your own thing, is rarely a clean break. It's a messy internal battle with your own ego. We've spent decades defining ourselves by our titles. If you aren't the senior vice president of something, then who are you? When you step away from the noise, the silence can be terrifying. You realize that your identity was mostly just a collection of habits and obligations. Without the commute, the meetings, and the office gossip, there's a vacuum. Most people run back to the cage simply because they don't know what to do with their hands when they aren't typing. It's a contradiction, really. We spend our lives complaining about the grind, but the moment the grind stops, we feel a crushing sense of guilt. We feel like we're breaking some unspoken law of the universe by being productive at a park bench or in a different time zone. We've been conditioned to believe that work must be miserable to be legitimate. But the new rich understand that the office is a concept, not a location. You can be more effective in 2 hours of focused solitary work than in 8 hours of performative busyness. Funny how we're more afraid of a quiet afternoon than a stressful year. We've been taught to mistake movement for meaning. To leave the office without burning your identity, you have to realize that you are not your job. You are the person who uses the job to fund a life. If the job starts consuming the life, the tool is broken. Taking your freedom isn't an act of rebellion, it's an act of sanity. It's realizing that the world won't stop spinning if you aren't there to watch it. In fact, it might actually start looking a lot more beautiful. Chapter 7. Filling the space after work stops, defining you. You finally get what you wanted. The income is automated, the boss is gone, and the calendar is a blank, white sheet of paper. And then, usually around 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, the panic sets in. It's a quiet, cold realization that when you remove the weight of the 9 to 5, you lose the very thing that was keeping you upright. We've spent so long fighting against the current that we don't know how to swim in still water. We've used too much work as an excuse for why we aren't happy, why we aren't fit, or why we don't have hobbies. When the work disappears, the excuse goes with it, and you're left looking at a stranger in the mirror. Freedom asks you who you really are. Most people think the end goal is a permanent vacation, but a life of pure leisure is just another kind of cage. After the third month of sitting on a beach, the margaritas start to taste like boredom. We aren't designed for a state of static rest. We're designed for meaningful challenge. The mistake is thinking that we have to wait for retirement to find that meaning. The new rich don't retire. They distribute their life. They take mini-retirements. 2 months in Berlin to learn the language, 6 weeks in a cabin to write, a month of doing nothing but being a parent. They treat life like a series of seasons rather than a single, grueling marathon, followed by a collapse at the finish line. It's a strange truth that when you stop being busy, you actually have to start being human. You have to figure out what you care about when no one is paying you to care. It's an uncomfortable transition. I've seen people win their freedom only to fill the void with more consumerism, more social media, or a new, even more stressful business, just to avoid the silence. We're so afraid of the emptiness that we forget that emptiness is exactly where creation happens. It's the space where you finally have the room to grow into the person you were before the world told you who you should be. Funny how we spend our lives trying to escape only to realize that the hardest part is staying present in the freedom we worked so hard to build. We're so used to doing that we've forgotten how to be. But the goal of the 4-hour work week isn't to work 4 hours. It's to have the other 164 hours back. It's about reclaiming the right to be curious, to be spontaneous, and to be bored. It's about realizing that life isn't a problem to be solved with more productivity, but an experience to be lived with more intention. We're all just trying to find our way back to a version of ourselves that isn't tired all the time. We want to believe that there's a way to exist that doesn't feel like a compromise. And there is. But it doesn't start with a new app or a better schedule. It starts with the quiet, terrifying decision to stop waiting for a better time. I wonder, if you woke up tomorrow and the office was gone, if the money was handled and the shoulds were silent, what would be the first thing you'd do that isn't for anyone else? Sometimes the answer to that question is the most honest thing we've said in years. If you feel like sharing that small, honest thing, I'd love to read it in the comments. It's good to know we're not the only ones trying to figure out what to do with the silence. If these reflections felt like home to you, maybe stick around for the next one. It's a long road, but it's better when we're walking it together.